Animals learn what to eat and what not to eat from their mothers before they are born. It is a taste they pick up in utero as the mother eats her way across the landscape. Well, if such is the case, we have to wonder, what are humans learning about what to eat from their mothers?
Welcome to the award-winning Food Chain Radio Show with your host, Michael Olson. And now get ready for 1 hour of What's Eating What Radio.
Welcome to the 1355th edition of the Food Chain Radio program. Or hey, perhaps you're among our friends over there in Frankfurt who are tuned into the Food Chain as we stream along at metrofarm.com. Well, whoever you are and wherever you are, welcome aboard. I am Michael Olson, your host for this hour of What's Eating What. Also with me in the studio today, we have restaurateur Carolyn Rudolph of Charlie Hong Kong here in Santa Cruz, California. Welcome, Carolyn.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
And also intern producer Vanessa Salas, who's an agroecology student at UC Santa Cruz.
Hi, glad to be here.
All right. Well, folks, researchers believe that humans have been using plants as medicine for over 1,650,000 years, give or take. Birds, fish, insects, and other mammals are also known to self-medicate with plants when experiencing illness of one kind or another. In the last 100 years or so, we humans began industrializing our food chain, and now we no longer rely on plants to be our principal source of medicine. And why should we? After all, the grocer shelves are filled with potions and notions that claim to be able to cure just about every malady. And so today we are free to roam the range all day without having to eat a single plant. But then we wonder, are we missing something by turning our backs on plants? Is there some kind of magic that occurs when earth, sky, and water come together to present us with a plant? So we wonder, what are today's mothers teaching their young to eat? Well, here to help us find some answers, we have Fred Provenza, who is Professor Emeritus of Behavioral Ecology in the Department of Wildland Resources at Utah State University, which is a long way from your home digs now, Fred. So do you have to make the long drive into Utah to teach classes?
Nice to be with you, Michael, and Carolyn and Vanessa as well. Well, I retired 15 years ago, Michael, so I don't make the long drive anymore. I occasionally go down there and visit with colleagues who are working with plants and animals along the lines that we're going to talk about today. But mostly Sue and I spend our time up here in beautiful Montana.
Well, and good for you as well. It's my home turf as well. Now, you're also author of the Nourishment. You're author of Foraging Behavior and the Art and Science of Shepherding. And you're part of Nourishing, which is an extension service, I think, of the university. Am I wrong? I see.
Nourishing, Behave.
Behave.
Yes.
You have so many things that you have going on that I just confused. You have lots of things going on. But you're a co-founder of Behave. What is Behave?
Well, Behave was really going strong during the decade of the 2000s, Michael. And up to that point, we had done 25 years of research related to what you were talking about, this whole idea that animals have the ability to self-select diets that meet needs for nutrients. That would be energy and protein, as well as minerals and even vitamins, and that they know how to self-medicate. So we were learning about all those things. And as we did, there were a couple of people and myself that were associated with the project that would talk all the time about the practical implications of this for farmers and ranchers. We all had farm and ranch backgrounds, and we would just constantly be talking about that. This is so relevant. And we knew it because we'd spent time hands-on working on farms and ranches for many years. But we were so busy doing the research that it just wasn't possible. Well, and I was diagnosed with cancer in 1999, And when I got back to work, we said, if we're ever going to get this information out, we better start doing it. And we got a huge grant for us anyway, nearly $5 million grant through USDA. And the whole point was to pull together people from around the country, as it turned out, around the world, that worked on farms, on ranches, on land management. We picked the most innovative people we knew to be a part of our quote advisory board, and then to do outreach with those people. And it was an amazing 10 years. By the end of that 10 years, we had quote 250 people attending our annual advisory board meeting. And the whole idea was that we were all students. All of us were students attempting to try to understand principles and processes of behavior, and then to implement them to improve landscapes ecologically, economically, and socially. All three of those things, including this economic part that's so important of how do you reduce costs? That's what farmers and ranchers were interested in. How do we reduce costs? How do we do that? We get out of fossil fuel loops is how we do that. And so that's a little long-winded, but that was really an amazing project. And I still, there's still people that
know what it sounds like, Fred? It sounds like you were having a lot of fun to me.
Oh, we were. And it was so... Well, the whole research program for 25 years was creative because up to that point, and I'm reminded now, Michael, it's so relevant to what Carolyn talked about that you're doing in terms of foods, and Vanessa, and what you're involved in with Michael. But I was just asked recently by a group, it's an international group, there must be 20, 30 people involved in it. They're human nutritionists, hardcore human nutritionists, and they're raising this question: do humans have the ability to self-select for micronutrients? It's fabulous. And so their idea is, let's write a paper that outlines what's known about humans. Nothing. It's stunning to me when you think about it. We know nothing virtually about our abilities, not only to self-select for energy and protein and ratios of those as a function of needs, but micronutrients, it's just stunning to me. And so I'm happy to participate, but it's getting this all fresh in my mind and thinking about how can that be? How can that be that nobody even thinks about that there's a wisdom to the body in humans, that's physical and spiritual as well, that you have to tap into that, because no two creatures on this planet have been or ever will be the same morphologically or physiologically. It's stunning to me. And then, so I just added 4 paragraphs to this paper that was summarizing, our research group alone published 300 papers on this various facets of this topic over the last 45 years.
Incredible.
And all experimental analysis. So it's not just waving our arms saying, well, I think they can select for energy and protein and all the minerals and all that. It's all data-based, but it makes me sad. And I think, well, what happened? What happened? And you're raising this. What happened with our food? Well, they've been hijacked. How have they been hijacked? The food industry.
That's what we're going to be talking about today.
The pharmaceutical industry.
Yeah. Let's throw Carolyn in here. Fred, Carolyn has a point, and she feeds a lot of people. Carolyn?
Yes.
I say feeding people is my spiritual practice. I'm kind of obsessed with it. So many years ago when I was in school, I'm an educator, I remember some study where they had babies and food out, and the study was like they went to the things that had the most nutrition.
Yes.
Now, this is, of course, before there was a lot of junk food, because I'm old.
Yeah, well, I
older.
am too,
well, Fred, before you go on, that's how I wanted to introduce Fred here.
And then one more thing I wanted to add to it, is that I'm thinking about indigenous cultures that don't actually have this problem, who ate with the land, ate with the season, ate with and knew how to use natural plants for healing, are they included in the study?
Yeah.
Yes. Well, I'll springboard off of your first comment. That was work that Clara Davis did back nearly 100 years ago, where
I'm not
she
that
had,
old.
she had, I'm not either. Sometimes I feel like it though, but she had what, 15 infants given up for adoption. Very early in their life. She ran the study for 6 years. 6 years, imagine
Wow.
that. 34 foods available seasonally at the markets is what they were offered. And absolutely what you said, Carolyn, those children, it's just such fascinating work. Because she said, at first they showed no sign that they innately knew what to eat. They sampled everything, including the napkins, all the different things. But given a little time, each child would settle into a combination of foods that met its needs. No two children ever selected the same diet. No child ever selected the same foods from day to day. But every child selected a diet that met its needs. And they had pediatricians that were working with them over those 6 years. And they said they'd never seen a healthier set of children. And that's all published. That information's published. So there you go. And, I quote that line for line because when we started some of our work offering, you may or may not know this, when cattle, for instance, are the way they're typically raised here in the U.S. They're born and raised on some rangeland. When they're fairly young, 6, 8 months of age, they're weaned from their mothers. They're shipped and put into feedlots. And those in the feedlots, they're offered these what are called total mixed rations. And that's just different ingredients that are ground and mixed together so the animals have no chance to self-select what each one would need. Well, we ran studies with sheep and with cattle where we would either feed a total mixed ration or offer the animals a choice of the 5 ingredients that were in that total mixed ration. And when we published, we wrote exactly what Clara did. No two individuals ever selected the same combinations of food. No individual ever selected the same food from day to day. But they selected a diet that met their needs. And what was even more interesting is that they did that by eating less food than the animals that were fed the total mixed ration. And so it cost less to finish them. And it's amazing. And so we used the very same words, unbeknownst to us, that Clara had published on those data. It was like we plagiarized her, though we'd never even read her studies. It wasn't until after we'd published. And Mark Shaxter, actually, the guy who wrote The Dorito Effect, a Canadian author, was asking, do you know about Clara's studies? Said, no, never read about them. It's amazing work that she did that illustrates very clearly that we humans have the ability to self-select. And
okay, you're going to have to hold that point, Fred. We're going to take a quick break. This is the Food Chain Radio program. This show's out of control already, and it's a lot of fun. So we were talking with Fred Provenza, who is the author of several books, but he is a guru of plant and animal nutrition. And when we get back, we're going to talk about his goats and how they became super goat herd. Do stay tuned. This is the Food Chain, right back. For ag and industrial real estate, call Chuck Allen. Chuck Allen is a lifelong resident of the Pajaro Valley, a friend of everybody, and has closed so many real estate transactions, the Wall Street Journal and Keller Williams both list him as one of the nation's top producers. So for ag and industrial real estate, call the top realtor, Chuck Allen, at chuckallenproperties.com. chuckallenproperties.com.
Hey, crab lovers, it's the 21st Annual Fairgrounds Foundation Crab Feed, Saturday, March 2nd, 5:30 p.m. at Cressetti Hall, Santa Cruz County Fairgrounds. It's an all-you-can-eat crab, barbecue chicken, salad, garlic bread, and clam chowder dinner with plenty of fun. There will be live and silent auctions featuring local products, exciting event packages, and scrumptious dinners. Get your tickets early, as this popular event is known to sell out. Tickets are available at fairgrounds-foundation.org.
Cannabis is one of nature's most beneficial plants, so at Treehouse, we use it to build community. Hello, I'm Jenna from Treehouse Dispensary in SoCal. In addition to the finest cannabis products, Treehouse dispenses information to those who want to know how to use cannabis for maximum benefit. Though we aren't medical professionals, we do know how cannabis science can help you. Listen to Carly.
Thanks, Jenna. For those who wake up in the middle of the night and can't go back to sleep again, Treehouse suggests a chocolate edible like Sleepy Time from local Santa Cruz brand Sensi Chew. Eat this THC CBN chocolate caramel and sleep the night away.
To learn how to use cannabis for the best effect, just ask us, your friends and neighbors at Treehouse Dispensary, 3651 SoCal Drive in SoCal. You must be 21, but no appointment is necessary, and the information is free. And for those who already know what they want, Treehouse has an online ordering option at ourtreehouse.io and drive-through pickup. We look forward to welcoming you to our Treehouse community.
Time to eat and talk business. Chef Ben here from the Back Nine Grill and Bar, inviting you to talk business over a leisurely lunch or a formal dinner or maybe a quick libation. The Back Nine is the easiest place to get to in Santa Cruz County. Easy off the Pasatiempo exit with ample parking and great food. The Back Nine is the place to meet for business and great food. Time to eat and talk business. See you at the Nine.
When you need help managing the legal affairs of your family, call on the Angel.
Hello, I am attorney Angel Hess, and I am ready to help. Whether you need a prenuptial agreement or divorce settlement, need child or spousal support, or are facing custody issues or visitation rights, I will help you. I have more than 7 years' experience as a family law attorney.
When you need help, call on the Angel. Attorney Angel L. Hess at santacruzlegal.net.
And now, back to What's Eating What on the Food Chain with Michael Olson.
And Fred Provenza, and Carolyn, and Vanessa, and you. Thank you for joining us today. We're talking about nourishing Earth, nourishing ourselves. And when I first had Fred on the Food Chain radio program, it was number 651, which was 704 editions of the Food Chain ago. And I introduced that show as follows. When one of Fred Provenza's goat herds took to eating wood rat houses instead of blackbrush and became a herd of super-performing goats, it gave him reason to pause and ask, do animals have an inherent wisdom about the nutrient feeds of their body, nutrient needs? Now, Fred, did you ever look back on that time and that goat herd that went to eating wood rat huts and think these goats are herding me into a career in nutrition?
Absolutely, Michael. I think it's not possible to overstate how important it is spending time in natural environments, observing plants and animals, learning from plants and animals, letting them be our teachers. So over and over and over again, the plants out there too were teaching me something. We were using goats browsing during winter to prune this shrub called blackbrush that lives in monocultures across millions of acres in the transition zone between the cold and hot deserts down there in northern Arizona, southern New Mexico, gets into California a little bit. But anyway, so you browse the plant in the winter, it stimulates this new growth, and we knew the new growth was higher in energy, higher in protein, higher in minerals than the old woody plant material. So that was the idea. We'll use the growths to improve habitat, not only for cattle that winter there, but for mule deer, bighorn sheep, wildlife species as well. Turns out goats don't want to eat the new growth. 80 to 90%, let's say, don't want to touch the new growth. So I was learning, I was watching those goats and thinking, well, what's going on? But the one thing is that I absolutely believed, I don't know why, just believed that they knew what they were doing. And I say that because when I went back to Utah State, and this is no criticism of my sainted mentors and professors, but when I was telling them what I was seeing, they were amazed, but they were saying, well, I guess that just goes to show that domestic animals, as a result of 10,000 years of domestication, have lost the ability to know what to eat to nourish themselves. Self-medication wasn't even on the radar screens in those days.
Because these goats refuse to eat what you're being directed to eat, right? Why aren't you eating what you're supposed to eat?
Right, absolutely. And why are you eating wood rat houses? What the heck's wrong? But absolutely. And, I was working then, that was at a time when plant ecologists, were learning about the roles of these so-called secondary compounds in plants. I mean, they knew about something about primary compounds, energy, protein, minerals, and so forth, but plants produce tens of thousands of these compounds that come under broad headings like alkaloids and phenolics and terpenes, and nobody really knew what roles they played. Very early on, they thought they were simply waste products of plant metabolism. But what we were starting to learn then was that they can be defenses. They can be used by plants to protect themselves from too much grazing. And to make a long story short, we did a lot of studies, and we found out that there was a particular kind of condensed tannin in that new growth of blackbrush, and for 80 to 90% of the goats, it strongly deterred them. They did not want to fool around with it. Another 10 to 20% were different in terms of how they were built and how their bodies function, so they ate the new growth just fine. But so the goats were a step ahead of us, right? They knew something that we didn't know. And then to say, well, they're clearly not eating the most nutritious part, we didn't know the whole story. So constantly learning from these animals. Why were they eating the wood rat houses? Well, inside there's different rooms in those houses. Inside one of the rooms is the bathroom, and it's soaked in urine, and this gets to be a nuance of animal nutrition, but that urine-soaked vegetation becomes a non-protein source of nitrogen. Microbiome is big topic nowadays. Well, in ruminant nutrition, it's been the big topic for 100 years now. Anyway, microbiome needs nitrogen to function. When it's got a lot of energy and not very digestible energy, that is those woody twigs from the plants, then animals need a good source of nitrogen. Well, that's what those goats had discovered. And so the goats we had six pastures, each with a different group of goats. It was only one group of goats discovered that. I like to tease the Einstein of the goat world was in that group. But that group of goats performed way better during the 3-month trial that winter than all the other goats. And it was because they had that non-protein source of nitrogen. So yes, that's long-winded, but constantly learning from the animals. I think, too, you mentioned a book, The Art and Science of Shepherding. The shepherds in France, that's what they're doing all the time. They're working in partnership with livestock, in partnership. And they're learning from the animals all the time. And then that knowledge they use to work with the animals. It's a mutualistic kind of relationship. And so
kind of like a dance, isn't it?
Yes, it's a dance. It's a dance. And when you think nowadays about the roles that livestock could play in partnership with humans to revegetate landscapes, to fix carbon in soil, to improve habitat for wildlife species. These are the things that I was involved with over the years of my career. Is how do you, one quick story. You get old, Carolyn, and you have too many stories. But, so I worked for 7 years on a ranch in Colorado and changed everything I've done research-wise, has to do with what the old rancher Henry DeLuc and I used to talk about. What's it mean to know the range? Carolyn, you were alluding to that when you were talking about indigenous peoples. That's what they did. They knew the range from eons of living on that range. And all of our ancestors did too until the last few hundred years, fact is. But so I was working on this ranch, but I was also going to school in wildlife biology at Colorado State University. And one thing that was really clear to me was that people in wildlife did not like people in the ranching community. Why? Because livestock were seen as despoilers of landscapes due to what happened in the late 1800s, early 1900s, when people from Europe came in with their livestock and really did degrade rangelands. Well, when it came time to try to get into grad school, the program I was so fortunate to get into, the people there were looking at how can we use livestock to rehabilitate landscapes for wildlife. And I thought, wow, that's fantastic. That's transcending the boundaries that are being created by people who either in ranching community who don't like wildlife, or people in wildlife who don't like the ranching community. That's transcending all those boundaries and saying how can we work together. So
with respect to that, all of that knowledge you kind of packaged into a package called Nourishing Earth and Nourishing Ourselves, which was published in Perspectives, I believe, which is where I found it. And the first one is A Taste of Place, which is exactly what you're talking about. And as we were talking earlier, we were talking about how, children pick up what to eat from their mothers, and that teaching begins in utero, and as the mother eats her way across the landscape, as it were. So lead us into A Taste of Place. And you start with 3 different principles, and one of them is the necessity of variety in a diet.
Yes, I think that's so important, Michael. Nowadays in the farming community and ranching community, there's a huge emphasis nowadays on soils and soil health, the health of soils. And Carolyn, you mentioned
she's over there jumping up and down. Yes.
Well, yes. And you mentioned that you serve foods that are grown locally on
nutrient dense soil.
Yes, it's so important. The point I like to make that links that back to what you're saying, Michael, is that plants turn dirt into soil, and diverse mixtures of plants turn soil into homes, grocery stores, and pharmacies for all life above and below ground. So that's a mutualism as well, right? The soil doesn't do anything in and of itself. The plants in combination with the soil are what creates the homes, grocery stores, and pharmacies. And we could go into the importance of diversity and how each plant has its own rhizosphere, has its own unique chemical and physical characteristics that create homes for all these different creatures, bacteria, fungi, microinvertebrates, and all those kind of things below ground and above ground as well. And when you get diverse mixtures of those plants together, you have many, many, many homes, grocery stores, and pharmacies. I think, to me, nothing is more important than that for the health of wild and domestic creatures, and then our health as well, which we may or may not want to get into as we go along today. But that scales right up. We're not separate from any of that, of course.
And of course, when it comes to eating a variety of different plants, that gives the animal, the wild animal, the domestic animal, the opportunity to select from those plants that it believes it needs. Now, what if an animal is taken off pasture and put into a feedlot where they're fed one thing or one group of things? What happens then?
Yes, and I've thought about this so much over the years as we were doing our research. And I've had a lot of friends that have either been in the feedlot industry or have done research related to that. So what I'm going to say next, I don't mean as any condemnation at all, but as we were doing studies and seeing how important it is to have choice and ability to choose for individuals to meet their needs, I used to think, wow, when they're on total mixed rations, that's not going to work. When I think about the amount of grain that's in those rations, high grain rations, certainly ruminants like to eat a little grain in the fall of the year, but as the high levels of that grain are aversive to animals, it causes them to experience nausea. We did studies that showed if you give them antiemetic drugs, those are kind of drugs we take for motion sickness, or if we're in chemotherapy, they prevent us from experiencing nausea. When we were running trials and putting animals on antiemetic drugs, they would eat far more of poisonous plants. They would eat far more of feedlot rations. Why? Because the way that they experience malaise was knocked out, one of the ways that they experience that. You also have weaning animals and moving them and putting them in with creatures they don't know. So for many, many reasons over the years, I've come to think, really the best way is the way that was done prior to World War II, way back in the day, when animals were allowed to be raised by their mothers and live their lives on landscapes, and then they're slaughtered at that point. We've been doing many, many studies. I'm a cheerleader now. I don't dirty my hands anymore, but there's a person named Stefan von Vliet at Utah State University, originally at Duke, now at Utah State, Scott Kronberg with ARS in Mandan. We've partnered up, and Stefan now is working with so many people around the world to look at what happens to the phytochemical and biochemical characteristics of meat of animals that have been finished in a feedlot versus finished on rangelands. And they are so totally different. And those, by the way, animals finished on diverse species on rangelands are markedly different from any of the plant-based meats that you see in the store. Much, much richer in phytochemicals and biochemicals that promote human health, basically. And that's coming as a result of eating diverse mixtures of plants. We had a study that was just published on bison. And in this case, bison in pens were offered a choice of alfalfa hay, meadow hay, and corn, and their meat was compared with that of bison that were reared on phytochemically rich rangelands, eating diverse arrays of species. Huge differences in terms of the much greater phytochemical richness in the meat and fat of the animals from the rangelands, higher in antioxidants, anti-inflammatory. The other thing that struck me as most interesting, Stefan van Vliet is a human nutritionist. That's what he studies, is humans and athletes and so forth. He said, when you look at the muscle tissue from the animals on rangelands, it's much more like a healthy athlete. Why? They're eating a diverse array of really wholesome foods, and they're out there exercising each day. The animals from the pens, much more like a couch potato with early stages of metabolic syndrome. So huge differences between creatures that are finished in a feedlot versus creatures finished on rangelands.
And speaking of creatures, what about us? My goodness, it seems like we're being fattened up on feedlot food. My goodness. Hold on, Fred. We're going to take a quick break. Folks, this is the Food Chain Radio program. Right back with Fred Provenza and you and food. That's what we're eating,
Well, I suppose you're not surprised. People have been asking me, what's the big deal with these pharmacy ads? Well, between diabetes testing and stroke and blood pressure medications, the pharmacy used to love me. I can see why some folks struggle between prescriptions, eating, and paying the bills. With monthlyfeerx.com, I pay one small monthly fee for all of my meds, and that includes the diabetes kits. If you pay more than $20 a month, check out monthlyfeerx.com. If your family spends more than $30 a month, even if you're a family of 8, 9, 10, 12, check out monthlyfeerx.com. Believe me, it's a game changer. Thanks to monthlyfeerx.com, I now have the extra money to go out and do fun things. monthlyfeerx.com. And did I mention that your meds get delivered discreetly to your mailbox?
How would you like to be part of a great mission?
You can help the Epoch Times fight for a free press.
America's news outlets no longer tell you the truth. In fact, 90% of the media is owned by just 6 corporations.
But honest traditional journalism isn't dead. You can find it in the pages of the Epoch Times. Go to readepoch.com and try it.
1 month for just $1.
When you do, you're supporting real news and helping us in the fight against fake news.
You'll read the truth about how China promotes communism inside the United States and why so many American companies hide the truth about China.
You'll read stories about American politics written without a political agenda.
It's journalism that you don't get from our dishonest legacy media and without the tyranny of big tech.
Be part of a great mission. Subscribe now, 1 month for $1 at readepoch.com. That's readepoch.com.
Life is short, and family is everything. Celebrate both with a Sunkissed family reunion. Hello, I'm Heather from Sunkissed Explorations. I will take care of all of the details for your family reunion vacation so you can have the time of your life.
Hello, I am Dennis. I enjoy getting the extended family together, which isn't easy. Heather with Sunkissed Explorations is able to take over the planning and execution of these trips, and everyone raves over the enjoyment and memories we make. I recommend her for any of your travel needs.
Celebrate life and family with a Sunkissed family reunion that will leave a lifetime of memories for everyone. I am Heather with Sunkissed Explorations, and I will take care of all of the details for you at no additional cost. Call or click sunkissedexplorations.com, sunkissedexplorations.com.
So much to say, so little time to say it on the food chain with Michael Olson.
Well, that was a very interesting break because the show simply didn't stop at the break. It just kept right on and going. And Fred, you were saying it's time we take a serious look at this way we're feeding our animals and ourselves. Want to pick that up?
Yes, well, Carolyn was making
let's blame it on Carolyn, who feeds a lot of people at a restaurant.
No, I'm not. Carolyn, say your point. So you say it, and then I'll just springboard in to compliment that.
Things just feel like they're out of balance. And what is causing the out of balance is, how do we look at it? There's only one way to say it. It's the financial benefits for the larger organizations when we got away from smaller farms. And I understand people need to make a living. I get that. But what has happened to us, I took beef off the menu because of its incredible carbon footprint. We're a green business. It just felt hypocritical to be offering. And then the way the beef is raised, and we couldn't find a distributor to provide us with enough, grass-fed land beef. So we just took it off the menu. Not a popular decision, but it just felt like the right thing to do.
Fred?
Yes, and the point that you make, Carolyn, too, I think it's important for people to think if they appreciate what the points that we're trying to make here, is to think about where can I source food that's being raised ethically and being raised to not only minimize the carbon footprint, but to fix carbon in soil, to use animals to build up landscapes. And so I think it becomes really important to start to think along those lines.
But you present another line here, and Carolyn and you would make a great conversation here. And that, Fred, is your point as livestock as medicine. And you're talking about beef or other animals raised on very nutrient-rich, phytochemical-based plant life instead of feedlot food, and how
Absolutely.
and how those animals can be introduced into the diet as a source of medicine. Why?
Yes, it has to do. So I'll preface my comments by saying I never make a point never to take sides when people talk about plant-based versus, I have good friends that are vegan and vegetarian. I have good friends that are also carnivores, strict carnivores.
We've been arguing about this for 2,000 years.
Oh, I'm telling you, I never take a side because I say, each person needs to try to get in tune with their body. And that's not easy to do because we're so influenced by all that we hear in the media. But get in tune with your body and with eating wholesome foods and let your body guide you. So I never try to make a distinction and say, there are compounds in plants that are much higher than they are in animals that can really, that are important for human health in fruits and vegetables and so forth. But the same thing is true with meat as well. There are compounds in meat that are also really important for human health. And when you have animals that are foraging on diverse mixtures of plants, their bodies are not only making those compounds, but they're being added to that. All of these many phytochemicals that are in the plants are getting into the meat and fat. And so the meat can be a rich source of nutrients as well for humans, and has been over the eons as well. But the point that Carolyn is making relative to carbon footprint and then we've written papers that were very popular is are livestock good for human and environmental health? And we're talking about it all depends on how they're raised, what they do in terms of, and that's the nuance that I would like to see get into the conversations. I read many things now that just are so negative on livestock, and it's the feedlot model. And so, when you look at all these crops that are grown in monoculture, I often think of what's known nowadays about plant consciousness, plant sentience even. And, I wonder what a plant would choose if it had the choice between being raised in a monoculture with only things like it or being raised in a diverse mixture. I know that may sound ooey, but diverse mixtures of plants, there's so many mutualisms that are taking place within those communities that end up benefiting the health of all life on this planet.
So let me back up just a little bit, pick up Carolyn here. You said something that captured my attention, and that is that when an animal, a cow, for example, eats a real diverse diet of many different kinds of plants growing in the pasture, it can assimilate all of those things in its meat and therefore provide it to whoever eats it. So it's not just like it has a few things to offer, it has many different things from the pasture.
That's right, many. I don't know, Michael, just a slight qualification, maybe not every one of them, but many of them. The work that Stefan's doing using metabolomics kind of analyses simply reveals the diversity of these compounds, and then they can look at the amounts of the compounds. And so it's it's amazing to see that. And what that does too, we mentioned that livestock can learn how to self-medicate for ailments. When they're sick, they can learn which plants are important for them to eat, to deal, for instance, with internal parasite loads. Tannins and terpenes can reduce internal parasites. And you could go on and on related to that. But the other thing that's really struck me over the years is when they eat a little bit of a diverse array of these plants, what they're really doing is self-medicating prophylactically, preventatively, all those compounds. If you think of a cell, and we're each composed of trillions of cells, a cell is a universe in and of itself. It's its own world. It has the membrane, which is the brain, with thousands of receptors. Each one is conscious, and but the only way a cell can forage on what it needs is if that what it needs is in the capillaries. If it's getting
there,
in those capillaries, the cell can forage on that. And so when animals eat diverse arrays of plant species, they're enabling those cells to forage on what they need. And those phytochemicals can counter all of the 7 hallmarks of a cancer cell. So if a cell that potentially could be errant and start to become cancerous doesn't have access to what it needs for its own health, I think of that all the time. It's cells and organ systems that are influencing, and those cells and organ systems are a wisdom of the body that's so important. When you look at the number of nerves that ascend from the organ systems of the body to the brain stem, it's far more that ascend than that descend from the central nervous system down, if that makes sense. Well, all those nerves and neurotransmitters and hormones are the feedback, providing the feedback that's altering liking for the flavors of foods as a function of needs. That's how that works. And it's not a conscious thing. It's operating below the level of conscious awareness. Where we muck it all up is when we start to think about it and overthink about it. And when we're served, when our food preferences are hijacked by a food industry that's just loaded with all these processed and ultra-processed, man-made kinds of things. I like what Jack LaLanne said ages ago. If man made it, don't eat it. Don't eat it. That's pretty simple. I've read a long article by people I respect recently that were talking about nuance of ultra-processed foods and all the names and labels and everything. And, we're all busy nowadays, so who has time to cook your own food? And I agree. But you know what? If man made it, it's a pretty simple deal. When you're walking down those aisles, if a human made it, just avoid it. That's black and white, right? Go buy. Grow your own fruits and vegetables if you can, or at least buy wholesome meats, and get out of those loops that really fuel obesity, diabetes, metabolic syndrome, all of these issues. Just it's very easy for me to just say those words, but it's just kind of cutting to the chase. I mean, sometimes you read things that it's like we so beat this stuff to death. Just say it, just frickin' get that stuff out of your diet and let your body start to tell you what it needs. Start to tap into the wisdom of your own body, physically and spiritually as well. I'd make that same case for that, I think.
Carolyn.
Fred, thank you so much for the years that you've put into doing this research. I just am so grateful to know that you're out there and this research is out there. And I always have been questioning why our country doesn't value nourishing their citizens as a number one. Because if you're not nourished, you can't make decisions clearly, your body's not going to support you. And I read a study many, many years ago that during World War II, when they were drafting men, many of the men from the South were so malnutrition, they weren't qualified to go into the Army, and that there was a decision made, we're going to turn food into corporations so that we can feed the whole country. So maybe the intention was good, but something happened along the way with this corporate farming, that's what I'm calling it, the use of pesticides. I am blessed to live in Santa Cruz where there's a farmer's market with fresh produce almost every single day of the week. I buy produce from a farmer's market, gorgeous organic produce in season, which is another thing. I saw someone with a melon in their basket in the grocery store, and I almost went up to him and said, really? It's February here. So, and I chase something organic from the market. So blessed we have so much market that offer it. But the market, it just didn't have the quality of taste as something that had just been harvested and picked and brought to a market and brought to my home.
Yeah. That takes us really quickly.
Amen to all of that.
Amen to that, Carolyn.
Amen to all of that. And I just couldn't agree more. And you look at now in the service, most of the people that are going in aren't in very good physical condition to do that. When you look, it's just nothing's more important. And, when I was on the ranch, Henry used to say, there never has been any money in farming. And we used to talk about what's more important than the source of food for the people in your population. And yet that's not given it's fundamental to all of it. So I get wound up, but I so agree with everything you were saying, and that you're promoting, Michael, and Vanessa, that I know you're promoting.
She's smiling.
So really quickly, we have a couple of minutes left here.
I have to say, Fred, you have to come to my house. I want to feed you dinner. Please come.
Yeah,
bring your family.
I would love it.
So we're all going to come. Okay, that's the deal. So really quickly, Fred, I started the show talking about how babies and children get their taste for food from their mother and beginning in utero. What are expectant mothers feeding their children? What are they teaching their children to eat in today's modern world?
It's a mess, Michael. It's a mess. And there is a good literature out there in the human literature on that, of these experiences in utero and early in life. And, you think if a young child from when it's conceived is being conceived on ultra-processed kinds of foods, they're born already with early stages of metabolic syndrome. And so, you think, how do they even have a chance to grow up and be able to function normally? I think of this lady I know and really like. She's about our age. She had 4 children. 2 of the children she had when she was on a much better diet, actually. Fact is, those children now are lean. They're really lean. They're not. The 2 children she had after she got on all the ultra-processed foods and stuff and had gained so much weight, oh my gosh, they're just struggling with obesity. And I tell that story not to be negative on her, but that is what has been found over and over again in the human literature on mother-young interactions. Now, let's contrast
with that. That's a great place that we have to end this story, because we're out of time, Fred, but we could spend a month with you talking.
Well, maybe we can pick up, because I was going to...
We're going to pick up this conversation. We're not going to let it go, but we're going to have to end it right now because we're out of time. But thank you. And your words from way back in 704 shows ago still ring in my brain, and that's why I always look forward to having you back on the Food Chain Radio program. Thank you, Carolyn. Thank you, Vanessa. Thank you all out there for tuning in. Remember Michael Olson's second law of the food chain: the farther we go from the source of our food, the less control we have over what's in our food. Thank you.
You've been listening to the award-winning Food Chain Radio show with Michael Olson. And if your friends missed the show, tell them to log on the Food Chain page at metrofarm.com for a listen. Now, go out and find some food with its farmer's face on it and live.